Hey, y'all. Welcome to Thursday and the family meeting. Come on in the room. Let's sit down. We have some things to talk about for a little while tonight, anyway. Welcome wherever you are joining from. Let's see. Hey, Victoria. Hey, Linda. We got Tammy here. Katie, what's up, y'all? Hello, hello. You guys, I am going to jump right in and ask the question of what. No, look, I probably shouldn't ask this question because I live in California. So forgive me if you in New York, because I know I should be looking at my own state first. But what's going on in New York? You guys, New York had a mayoral primary election and voted in the primary for the Muslim socialists. And this is where I think conversations of culture and worldview really come into play. Now, I don't think that this Muslim Zoran is his first name, I believe. I think that he is like some jihadist who's going to call death to America. I think well, maybe it has yet to be seen, but I haven't seen anything like that from him. But what concerns me is the socialist perspective that he brings to this conversation of American culture. And it makes me question, are we just continuing as a nation to put forward socialist ideas and ideals and continuing to say, yeah, this is actually the way that we want to go? I do have concerns about his being a Muslim and what that means to, Christians in New York and things like that. But we're going to look at some clips from him speaking and just kind of talk about what this means. And then I want to, from there, go to the Chicago Teachers Union president, who is making the rounds on social media as well. And you know what? We're going to talk about some of the wording that she used that is also socialist. I don't know if she's a socialist. I don't know if she's part of the Democratic Socialist Alliance or anything like that, but the wording is definitely there. And again, it's about worldview and culture. And it makes me wonder, are we just, and I think Krista and I have both said this, we've been feeding our kids socialism for quite a while. We've been feeding them critical theory for quite a while. And especially in colleges and universities, they get this teaching and then they go out into the real world and they put it forward. And so I kind of think that that's what this looks like. Let's go ahead and look at the first clip. I don't know if Chris is going to join us tonight. She's over here in the wings, but let's look at the first one.
I only have one clip.
I added two to it.
Oh, okay. Well, hopefully I'm the right one.
The first one is fine.
Okay.
But there should be three.
Okay. All right. There we go.
बात ये नहीं है कि मैं क्या बनूंगा, बात ये है कि मैं क्या करूंगा हमारे कम्युनिटीज के लिए और हर एक न्यूयॉर्कर के लिए। मैं हमारे शहर को अफोर्डेबल बनाऊंगा। न्यूयॉर्कर्स मुश्किल से अफोर्ड कर रहे हैं रोटी, कपड़ा और मकान। मैं ये सब बदलने के लिए लड़ रहा हूँ। रेंट फ्री बसेस, यूनिवर्सल चाइल्ड केयर और सस्ती ग्रोसरीज के जरिए। पर आपको एक सवाल पूछना चाहता हूँ, तुमने कभी किसी को वोट किया? बात ये नहीं है कि मैं क्या बनूंगा।
Right, you have to translate that.
Okay, no, I cannot translate that. Chris was like, you need to translate that. I can't translate that. Now they're in the subtitles. In the subtitles, what he's saying is that he is going to make New York affordable. He's going to make New York a place that has free buses and cheaper groceries. And, he's listing out all of these things. Rent freezes, I think, is one of the things that he listed in there. Free healthcare or affordable healthcare and all of these things. And it really does give that kind of socialist bend to it, and he has stated clearly all the things that he wants to do to make New York very socialist light. and I don't even know if it's socialist light, but socialist leaning in all of the things that will be free, things that will be affordable. We will have rent freezes and all of this. I honestly also think that it's very interesting that here in America we have a commercial that is not in English. That's just a sub note, or like a sub point. But when I think about California, we also have tons of commercials that are not in English. When I watch the news and a commercial comes in that's in all Spanish, it makes me question, like, well, what are we doing? What are we doing as Americans? But again, it's part of this, to me, an undermining of the values of America in exchange for something else. Let's play the second clip.
Oftentimes, we've even found as legislators, when we go into these courts, the term violent crime is even used when people are stealing packages. Violent crime is even used when people are accused of burglary and there happens to be a housing unit in that same dwelling. So violence is an artificial construction. And we have to be very clear that what is happening here with these district attorneys, that is violence. That is violence of the highest degree. We have
Violence is a social construction. Okay. So this is more along the lines of that critical criminology. Okay, how do we see those who are criminals as oppressed people? How do we change the laws? How do we defund the police? How do we relook at what violence really is to be able to make sure that we have an equitable view of violence, an equitable view of sentencing, and equitable, like everything is going to come down to this idea of equity. But in order for us to do that, we need to rethink or reimagine what violence really is. I didn't pull a clip of it, but places in England, I believe it's England, have had protests recently because of all of the Muslim infiltration within their area. And what the Muslim infiltration has come with, the Sharia law and all of this that has now taken over a lot of places in England. Is this where America is heading? This is the question that I'm asking. Or is this what we're comfortable with? How are people voting for this? Like, how are we voting for this? Like, when did we become a nation that was, and I know it's happened very slowly. The term that came to mind is the long march through the institutions, but we have become a nation that really is quite comfortable and soft on our values, and we're comfortable with being soft on our values and really looking to deconstruct a lot of what is seen as, the term I'm going to use is hegemonic discourse, this hegemony, this narrative, this widely set narrative that is the main narrative in American culture, and we want to exchange that for the minority view or the minority lens. But when the minority lens is actually anti-America and anti-Christian, is that really something that we want? I wonder who were the voters in this election? And what was their thought process? Like, is this a bunch of people who just have white guilt? Are these a bunch of minorities who are like, yes, now it's time for, our voices to be heard and for, us to receive our reparation through all of the free things? I think Krista told me that, who are the majorities that you said were the majority voters in this election?
White people and Asians.
Whites and Asians. Makes me ask a lot of questions. I am not sure at this point what we need to do. I have been asking and praying, like, Lord, what do we need to do as people who love our country? Well, and love God, like, and please, like, I'm not trying to, put country above God. That's not it. But as people who do love God and really love our country and don't want to see our country go the route of many European countries, Like, how do we stand against what seems to be coming? I think on the West Coast, we have, the immigration conversation, and, Krista and I tackled the immigration conversation last week, but there is definitely an intent to overthrow America, to overthrow not just America, but the West, the white Western European way of doing things, the value systems of the West, and things like that. Socialism is not a value system of the West. And so I am highly concerned. I'm highly concerned when I see people like an Ilhan Umar and Zoran, and I cannot pronounce his last name, coming into office, being voted in by Americans, and then, doing what with our nation? I'm gonna look at some of the comments. All right, not much here. We've had a Muslim in Michigan heavy for maybe 2 decades, but the wokeness, multicultural rhetoric is the real danger. Not expecting people to adjust to American values can and will be detrimental. Can you do me a favor? Can you look in my briefcase and hand me, there should be a book on the dangers of multiculturalism. I think it's in the center part. Because I completely agree. There is an issue with multiculturalism in America. And so I got this book, and I haven't really done a deep dive on it, but it's called The Disuniting of America: Reflections on a Multicultural Society. And so what part of what I am hoping to look at is, what happens in a culture or in a nation when you go from being a melting pot to being a salad bowl, as Krista would call it. For a long time, we were seen as the melting pot where people came and you could melt and merge into this cohesive nation where we had shared values. Where is that? Because, and so what I'm getting to is actually the idea of assimilation. We cannot have people come to America, and this is, I'll give my own opinion. Krista might feel a little different, but, and I know she doesn't, because we've had like little arguments about this before. But, when people come into America and they don't want to be American, we have a problem. If you come into America and you still want to put the cultural values, religious values, and all of that of wherever you come from before the values of America, are you really becoming an American, or are you simply living here but holding on to all of the values of your old country? And if your values of the old country are harmful to America, is that someone that we want here? This does, bring us again into immigration policy, and, how do you actually hold that to a specific standard? Like, how do I actually know that this person isn't just playing the system and saying all of the right things and all of that? But assimilation is a huge conversation that many people are not talking about. Assimilation is almost now a dirty word. The idea of multiculturalism has been pushed and promoted so much that we have encouraged people not to lose their culture. I don't know that that's what people believed. Like when Krista's grandparents immigrated over, I don't know that they actually believed that we should be multicultural and that I should hold on to all of my old culture. They came over to be American. Now, sure, were there certain things that they may have participated in their home? Yes, but in the broader culture, they were American, and they understood that American values are really what they were participating in. Laura says this, it seems to be asking us to define multiculturalism. Yes, and what I would say the running definition of multiculturalism is this ability to have many cultures existing all at the same time, where I can, love and support my Hindu beliefs or my Baha'i beliefs and all of that, and that can live in the public sphere. And it can live right next door to the atheist, and it can live right next door to the Islamists, that we want all of these things to be true. And I am not sure that the human heart is good enough for that to actually happen. I do believe that people are going to want to be on top. And so in America, what are the values that should be on top? What you celebrate in your home, I say, hey, you can celebrate that behind, in your home, what you might celebrate at church or at a potluck. But in the public sphere, one of the things that we do, like, for example, is that swearing ins, people swear on the Bible. Okay. We do that not because that person is necessarily a Christian, but as a homage, I guess, to like our Christian heritage, our values. That is something that should not go away. You should not be able to swear on the Quran in America. But I don't know that that's going to be a value that many Americans hold to pretty soon. It makes me wonder. But we cannot act like, this salad bowl ideology is really going to work. Like, well, I'm a tomato and I'm just going to live here next to the lettuce. And I'm a cucumber and I'm just going to live over here and, just be a cucumber. At some point, we have to understand that there are specific values that are specific to America and a way that we live our lives that need to be upheld, and they should be predominant in our land. Let me see. Immigrants in the past created small communities that each had their own culture. Yeah, like little boroughs and things like that. And I don't necessarily know that I would, I don't know. I would need to think about that a little bit more. I would say within their communities, they would uphold and do things that were community specific around whatever culture or ethnic group they had. But how did they participate, in the bigger sector? I don't actually know that I am a supporter of, Little Italy or Little Armenia or, I don't know. I think it's a good point, and it's something for me to reflect on. We do have those communities here, so we do have Little Armenia. We do have like Little Ethiopia. Glendale, actually, which is a city not too far from here, I believe still has the highest concentration of Armenians outside of Armenia. And so, I get what you're saying. It's something that I would need to think on a little bit more to say, I strictly think, yes, that's a good thing, or no, it's not.
I think part of the issue, like when my grandparents came over as immigrants, they they lived in Dutch communities. So they came from Holland and then lived in Dutch communities in North and South Dakota. And my great grandfather never did learn English. He spoke Dutch till the end, and his kids had to translate for him. But I think that over time, those communities dissipated. Like that was kind of a one generation type of thing. After that, second generation, third generation moved away. They assimilated into the American culture more broadly. I think that the problem that we're seeing today is that there's intentional non-assimilation. And I think that that's the difference, is that there's people who are immigrating to countries, not just in America, but in the West in general, who intentionally do not want to assimilate to the Western values and Western way of life. Their intention is to change our values and to change our way of life. And I think that that's where it becomes problematic, because it's significant worldview differences. When you had Dutch people or Catholics or from Italy or the French or whatever coming over, they were still generally all Christian. They were under the umbrella of Christianity. What's happening now is quite a bit different.
Trisha, hey Trisha. She makes a comment and says, I honestly don't know that swearing on a Bible has much meaning for most Americans unless they are believing Christians. And you make a good point. It may not have much meaning for people who are not believing Christians, but it does have meaning for us as a nation. Because just because it doesn't have meaning for the person who's actually, being sworn in, it will have meaning for us as a nation if we change to having them being sworn in on the Quran. There is something to symbols. there is something to saying this is who we are as a nation, and whether you believe it or not, I could care less. What is true of our nation is this, and we show what's true of our nation, or what historically has been true of our nation, through our symbols. Symbols are a huge part of culture. And because symbols are a huge part of culture, to get rid of people swearing in on the Bible would fundamentally change our part of our culture. To have someone sworn in on the Quran, or I'm forgetting the yes, all of these different, religious holy books would say something very different about our nation. I think part of this conversation goes down to an idea of pluralism. And I used to be a very big proponent of pluralism. And the more I think about things and play things out to their logical conclusion, I really want to be a proponent of pluralism. I just don't know that especially like religious pluralism, and I just don't know that it really works all the time. So you guys can pray for me as I'm thinking this through. I don't want to, make a definitive, we should not be for pluralism, or we should be for pluralism. But I do need wisdom in that, so that I can speak more plainly about it. In the past, I have made comments about, yes, we should be a religiously pluralistic society. Yeah, but now I'm like, but look at what they're doing down in Texas, where people are protesting for Sharia law, and they're advocating to build like Muslim-only neighborhoods. How's that pluralism working out for us?
And I think that part of the issue is that in Islam in particular, I think there's two great threats to traditional Western values, and that's Islam and socialism. Now, socialism is our own internal Western contaminant. Like, Americans didn't invent it, but it comes out of the West. And we export that to the global South as sort of a new form of colonialism. But the Muhammadans, like, I think that what we're going to have to grapple with is that Islam is and the traditional Western values, not talking about socialism or postmodernism, but traditional Western way of life and values, is totally incompatible with Mohammedanism. And I think that that's what we're grappling with. I mean, I've said it since December 31st, that the big question we're wrestling with right now as a culture is the question of what is a nation? What does it mean to be a nation? Right now, we're talking a lot about what does it mean to have borders as a nation? What does it mean to have culture as a nation? This is a big thing that we have to have a lot of public conversations about. But I think the two great threats to our way of life is socialism and Mohammedanism. That's my opinion.
I will highlight Lori's comment. She says, if I don't believe in the Bible, and this is just the same thing that I said to Trisha too, but if I don't believe in the Bible, but swear on it, what does that mean? It actually just upholds the symbols of our culture. That whether you believe this or not, if you want this office, you will agree to the symbols of our culture. Culture is important. And if we understand that cultures flow from worldview, we have to understand that the symbols of this culture actually mean something. And so you might believe in squirrels that wear sombreros. I don't care. You want this office in this land, you will acknowledge the symbols that are important to our culture.
Even more than just the mere symbolism. Symbolism is part of it, but that there's a standard and a foundation for human dignity, and that is that we're created in the image of God.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a Judeo-Christian idea. Like, swearing on the Quran is not the same, because there is no image of God in Mohammedanism. So even if you are not a Christian, you are swearing to uphold the justice system that we have, that is based on the principles of the Bible. You are swearing to uphold human dignity endowed by its creator that has the Bible underneath it. Even if you don't personally hold to those beliefs, you are taking a sworn oath to implement its values. That's the value. Is, yes, it is symbolic, and it's like you're you're the second or third generation removed from your Christian grandparents, but you're still living the lifestyle to some degree in your Christian grandparents and what they said. As a traditionalist, you're kind of carrying on that legacy, even if you're not going to church every week, even if you don't know everything that's in the Bible. So
go ahead. You okay? I see you coming through. Got the whole background showing and stuff. Y'all seeing all the secrets today. Oh, I think I did know that about Victoria, that she is also my Haitian sister. Yes. So yeah, I have tons of concerns about what is happening. I have concerns about, whether this creates more, not ruckus, what's the word? Like, more support for others, for others for other Muslims to now run for office and to be elected. And what does that mean? What's happening in Texas and implementation, or fighting for, advocating for implementation of some Sharia law. Like, what does that mean in our own nation? And, how do we continue to fight against it? All right, guys, let's keep going.
I think what's interesting about this mayoral thing, before we leave this behind, is that he's kind of both of the errors. He's both a socialist and a Muslim. And so the two things I was bringing up of, like, I think that there are two great threats to the Western way of life is Mohammedanism and socialism. This guy represents both of those frameworks. And so it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. I can't believe I'm rooting for Eric Adams. Hopefully he'll win the election.
Yes, I am. Well, I'm only half Haitian.
Hold on, I gotta turn on your mic.
I'm only half Haitian. My mom is from, her people are from Philadelphia and Louisiana. And then my father is from, has connection to an area in Haiti named called Valère, Haiti. And, but came here after living in Port-au-Prince. Whole life. Yes. So, yep. I'm just saying. All right. So now let's go to the other thing that's been making the rounds. Krista sent this to me. My Twitter looks nothing like Krista's Twitter. My Facebook and Instagram, it's all very innocent. And I don't know why, because I intentionally don't look for things that are like, unicorns and rainbows. But Krista's Twitter is violent. Like, Krista's Twitter is always causing a stir. And so she sent me this short clip from the Chicago Teachers Union president. You want to put that up? Sure. And
what, the short one or the longer one?
You can do the longer one, that's fine. And
right.
And then I have her whole speech. So go ahead.
Baldwin says the children are always ours.
Always. Yes. Always.
Every single one of them, all over the globe. And what comes next is, CTU thinks your children are its children. Yes, we do. We do. We do. CTU thinks all children belong to it, and there's socialist conspiracy ideology. Well, I don't know about all that, but we like children. We educate them, we nurture them, we protect them, we support them, we negotiate for them, we create space for them. We even have them in our homes.
Hopefully she's talking about her own kids she got in her home. Don't just, okay. So this is I want to say her name is like Stacey Gates. And she's the president of the Chicago Teachers Union, and she made this statement at a function that she was that she did in Chicago. And apparently Twitter went crazy about, the fact that, the socialists always want your children and they want them. And they're even publicly now saying that they want your children. And so what I did was I went and I found the full not the conversation, but the full speech that she gave. And I do have some concerns. Like I think that conservatives and people who posted it on Twitter did take it out of context or attribute it to her. They didn't look at the full thing. That's the problem. They didn't look at the full thing. And yet I still have concerns. See, this is why we're not doing sleepovers. There it is. Yeah. So if we let's go to minute 9:20. And let's just look at some of, what she is talking about and what her plan is just in this talk that she's giving.
9:20.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, I'm going to give a lecture, which is what teachers should never do, by the way, and or what organizers always give is a call to action. President Trump is in full stride.
Okay, so what she's doing really is saying she's about to, as an organizer, give a call to action. Organizer and organizers are that word and terminology is largely socialist. You can think of what's the girl's name from BLM, Patrice Cullors, when she did that interview back in 2020, and she said, we are trained Marxist organizers. Okay. I'm not attributing to this woman that she is a Marxist, that she's a socialist. She could just be somebody that's misguided, not knowing what her wording is. But there is some intentionality in saying, what organizers do, they give a call to action. We can keep going.
He is. Project 2025 is becoming a part of our lived reality day by day. From forced birth to the dismantling of the Smithsonian to what appears to be an unconstitutional and unsanctioned war with Iran. We are coming to find that leadership is very important in all of these moments. And if you lead in the way that I lead, you have zero time for anything but organizing our neighbors, protecting our democracy, and resisting the chaos. Keep that word, chaos, through every tool in our collective boxes. We have to stay focused and clear-minded about our community. So hold on to that, and now imagine for a moment that you lead the largest school district in Illinois.
Sorry, there is a part that I was looking for, and I thought it was right there, where she gives the call to action, and she says that they have her major goals are to, let me see if I can find the wording. That her major goals and every teacher's major goals or objectives should be to resist, reimagine, and reconstruct. And so as she used those three words really intentionally, I want you to understand, what does resisting, reimagining, and reconstructing have to do with socialism? Because what she's doing in this organizing and this call to action is a very socialist in nature. Now, remember when she started out with the Baldwin quote, and we'll talk about the Baldwin quote in a minute, but what she said was, and then they're going to accuse you of being socialist. Well, I don't know about all that. Well, how you going to say out one side of your mouth that you don't know about all that, but then turn around and call people to action through organizing and use words like resistance, reimagine, and reconstruct? Krista did put a link to the full video in the chat, so you can click on that when we're done and, see exactly what she's talking about. But in resisting, what are we to resist? We are to resist capitalism. It's a call for revolution against capitalism. It's to oppose the existing systems of power. Think colonialism, patriarchy, what is being defined now as systemic racism, which is a whole conversation. But it is not. Think our riots and our protests. These are actions of resistance. These aren't just, riots and completely, dismantling your neighborhood and making sure that the elderly don't have, pharmacies and things like that. No, we are resisting. The next word she uses is reimagine. Well, when we reimagine things, I don't want to reimagine things for the worse. Sadly, though, when I'm looking out on the landscape, I'm like, if I play this to its logical conclusion. But in socialism, we need to reimagine things to a socialist utopia. An example that I would give would be Kendi, who says when everybody can be anti-racist in all of their different, facets of how he defines anti-racism, well, then there won't be any racism. Now we have this grand utopia. I am not saying that Kendi is a socialist, but that is what his vision pushes toward. It pushes us toward this utopia. We need to reimagine what's possible. When I reimagine what's possible, the resistance comes easy, because I already have it in my mind's eye what will happen if I resist, if I protest, or, some people call it riots and burning stuff. But resistance isn't only about, protesting. I can resist through my language. I can resist through art. There's many different ways to resist, but resistance, and hearing that word, should always push us toward the idea of utopia. As believers, we should understand that utopia is not possible. Not this side of heaven. But again, she's not a socialist. She's mocking those who, CTU is socialist and and they just want your kids. But I think it was either Lenin or Stalin who said, give me 4 years. Like, give me your kids for 4 years. And then to reconstruct, it's to build a new order. But what is that order supposed to be? It's supposed to be a socialist order. We are supposed to reconstruct something that is non-capitalistic, something that is collective. It's good for the group, collective ownership, or just collective benefit. And so when you hear those 3 words, and I wish I could find the place in the thing.
I have it.
You have it?
Yeah.
Chris is going to play it. You're the best. Thanks.
I try.
I appreciate you very much.
I think I have it.
I hope you have it.
I hope I do too.
Did almost by 10 percentage points more.
You're talking about her being reelected.
That's something. Especially with teachers. Do you know any teachers?
Yeah, here it comes.
You know any teachers? So our objectives are to engage, to understand our role and responsibility as leaders in this moment, and to share that understanding in a way that helps us resist, reimagine, and reconstruct. You got it? Yes. Okay. So thank you for having me again.
Can Okay, so they need to understand their objectives in a way that will help them resist, reimagine, and reconstruct. But she's not a socialist. I can't make the 1 and 1 2. Like we have to understand that sometimes if it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it's a duck. That's all we like. I don't care what you call yourself. But if you participate this way, and these are the ideals that you uphold, and you will share publicly with people as the way to go, the vision, the objective of your teachers is to resist, reimagine, and reconstruct. What you're telling me is that what you're doing is you are leading a group of socialists. You are training people to be socialists.
Quack, quack.
You know what? Here we are. Here we are. So I did want to share that because many people don't understand what it sounds like just in regular rhetoric. When someone like an AOC gets on and says we need to reimagine. And it sounds really good. We need to reimagine what America can be. I don't need to reimagine nothing. I don't need a vision for a socialist utopia or when we need to resist. Help me understand, what are we resisting again? And what does the resistance get us to?
My favorite is when they want us to reimagine theology or reimagine the church or reimagine the great truths of the faith and resist the West, resist the oppression, resist all this kind of language. It's like, this is just borrowing the idea of socialism and just trying to bring it in. Just look at the number of books that, when we go to ETS recently in recent years, there's not a small number where the word reimagine or reframe or, that sort of language is in there. It's like, I want the books like Back to the Old Dead Guys. Like, those are the books I want. I want the old ideas, the old ways.
Or when they offer you a different lens to read something through. Yeah. Well, what is this lens that you actually want me to see this thing through? Are they shades? Are they like my lenses? Like, what am I supposed to see as I look through this lens? But Tammy says they're not even trying to pretend like they're educators anymore, are they? Well, they are. I mean, they're not pretending, but they are educators. The question is what are they educating you in? Or to what end are they educating you? They're not educating you into a value system that values America and individualism and, ideals that have historically been American. They are educating you into a socialist agenda that says, and this woman went over all the things. Again, the link to the full video was in the chat, but she went over, how are we defending the LGBTQ plus? How are we, getting rid of Trump? How are, MAGA is the great enemy. And so, and again, this isn't to put Trump, MAGA, and America over Christianity, but it is to say that worldviews create culture. And if her worldview is this flawed, what is the culture that she's going to create? Oh, goodness gracious. Now, I do want to talk about the original tweet that's going around on social media, which is this, thing where she says, we have your children. Can you play that one more time? It's there are children. I want to make sure that I quote it right because it is a quote from Baldwin and it is from what is the name of his book? It's not Next. It's not the Fire book. What is the name of that book? Did I write it down? Nothing Personal. Go ahead. That's the name of the book. That's the name. It's a more like an essay. It's an essay. You can play the short one.
CT, you think your children are its children?
Okay,
yes, we do.
Go ahead. I do want the long one. Sorry, I just want to hear the quote from Baldwin again.
Baldwin says, the children are always ours.
Always. Always.
Every single one of
Always.
them, all
We
over
do.
the globe. And what comes next is...
So she's talking about a Black author named James Baldwin. And man, I used to love me some James Baldwin. But James Baldwin, a homosexual writer from, he wrote, let's say he primarily wrote in the 60s, but I mean, his stuff spans 60s, 70s. And the context in which he was saying that the children are ours is one of morality. It's not one of usurping parental rights. Now, the first part that I want to tackle is that what she's actually doing in this talk is that she's quoting another teacher who happened to use Baldwin's quote. And then because that teacher used Baldwin's quote, there was the claim of that CTU wants the children and they're socialists and things like that. So she's not actually saying, oh, there are children. That wasn't in the larger scheme of the talk, what she was doing in quoting Baldwin. But in quoting Baldwin, and because this has made the rounds on social media, I want to talk about the quote. In his thought process, and as Baldwin was such an advocate of race and wanting to stand against racism and be for civil rights and things like that, part of what he was saying was this moral idea that the children are ours, like ours to protect. And so if I were in, I don't know, a foreign country, and there were, children who were being harmed, that child, it's ours to protect. They represent our future. How do we protect our children? I don't think that Baldwin would have made a socialist. Now he was in the early parts of his life socialist, democratic socialist, but he ended up finding issue with the Communist Party. He did not stay with the Communist Party and things like that. What Baldwin means by this moral idea of how do we protect children, regardless of skin color, from things like racism or, horrible atrocities that can happen to children, versus what socialists mean with they are our children, or what queer theorists mean, and people who teach from this skewed lens and worldview of, well, they're our children. I don't think that that's fair to say that that is what Baldwin himself meant. And I I take issue with, her position and posturing of Baldwin, because she then takes it and says, well, yeah, and yeah, they're ours. But I do think that what she's saying is they are ours. And it is because they are ours, we have the responsibility to indoctrinate. Because they are ours, we have the responsibility to teach them toward a socialist end. I don't actually think that Baldwin's position would have been that. I think Baldwin's position would have been more of a responsibility. Like, for example, when I used to lead children's ministry, I would often say, oh, I have a thing with my kids tonight. Did I think that the kids were mine? No. But if I was out with an outing with all those kids, would I have gladly laid down my life because they were mine? Yes. But there's a fundamental flaw and distinction between this idea of protection versus this idea of indoctrination. And I think that's where the president of the teachers union lies, is this idea of, I have a responsibility to indoctrinate, because they see it as a collective. Think about BLM and wanting the value to be like the village. So now they set themselves up and see themselves as the village who is responsible for the kids. So let me see what, gosh, I'm trying to look in the comments before I go to the next thing. What were you going to say, Krista? Sorry.
Do you see Lori's comment?
The focus of the NYC candidate is affordability, especially in housing costs. If I can't pay, I'm assuming she's saying if I can't pay my rent, what do I care what you call yourself politically? Well, I think that there's a lot of things that we should be caring about.
In other words, who cares if I'm a socialist?
Yeah, who cares if I'm a socialist? I think worldview is a very important part of, this conversation. And so with him having a socialist worldview, my question would be, well, where is the responsibility of work? Where is the responsibility of family coming to aid and assist? Like, there are biblical principles that we should be applying before we get to socialism. I do not see socialism as a method to human flourishing, nor do I see it as a biblical support. If you can't pay your rent, we can have other conversations, but what we can't do is adopt a worldview that is antithetical to Christianity. And so it does matter what you call yourself. We can talk about the state of welfare. We can talk about why people are living in poverty. But what I can't do is adopt a worldview, again, that's antithetical to Christianity. We can look at New York and we can look at their political history. We can look at who they've continuously voted for and what party they've continuously voted for, and maybe make some connections between, who they voted for, their political history, and the group of people who are living in poverty. We can talk about personal choice. Okay, if you can't pay your rent, maybe there are some choices that have been made that have aided in, your situation not being the best. We can have 1,000 conversations to understand the poverty dynamics within a certain community or within a certain people group. What I can't do as a Christian is advocate for a worldview that is antithetical to Christianity.
I thought it was interesting. I just looked up real quick on Grok, like what percentage of millennials are sympathetic toward socialism. Now the numbers vary by poll, but like in 2019, there was a poll, the YouGov poll, 70% of millennials said they were somewhat or extremely likely to vote for a socialist candidate. 2020, also YouGov poll in, let's see, millennials, 35% of millennials supported a gradual elimination of the capitalist system in favor of socialism. 49% had a favorable view of socialism. So there's definitely somewhere between like 45% up to 70% of millennials, depending on what poll you're looking at, that are sympathetic toward socialism. And the problem is that socialism just doesn't work. Eventually you run out of rich people and
everybody's going to be poor.
Say it again.
I said, and then everybody's going to be poor.
That's kind of what happens, is that, his idea of grocery stores, he's going to government control all of the grocery stores. Well, we already did that in communist Russia. Asked anybody who grew up in Eastern Europe during the Soviet Union. They know how that turns out. I mean, it's always long lines and food shortages. So people that condemn capitalism usually don't even understand it or how it works. They just hear socialism is like everything's going to be paid for magically by the government. They don't really understand the laws behind, the natural law behind money and economics. They just don't know. They haven't really been educated or thought it through.
Well, I would say there's that problem and part to it, but then there's also this idea of rights and who has the right to what is a right. Who do we have that conversation with, Krista, about rights? It wasn't Bill Roach. Who was it?
No, it was Scott Waller from Biola. We did a show 2 or 3 years ago now, on how rights were defined under the FDR administration and what happened and how that impacted, the last 70 years or so, where the definition of rights changed. But I think you'd be hard pressed to make the case biblically that, you know, the idea of socialism, I think you'd be hard pressed to find government compelled taking from one class to give to another. Like, that's just not a thing.
Well, I think, part of the conversation is what is a right and who has the right to what. And when we look at socialism and this idea of like Medicaid and Medicare, or welfare and everything that welfare covers, and housing subsidies and all of these things, people would say, well, it's a right. I have the right to these things. And a lot of socialists and democratic socialists, and even just people who may not say I'm a democratic socialist, but I, vote Democrat, that these are the rights of human persons. And I would argue, biblically, I don't know that we can make a case that this is a right. I think that what we see in scripture is the call for, in Israel, ancient Israel, we see, gleaning laws, and, being kind to your neighbor and helping out, and, all of these things, sharing. And we see those principles in scripture. But what we don't see is that it is your right as a citizen that the government must now provide all of these things. And that's part of my I have many issues, but with socialism. But it's part of my issue with these arguments. And someone like the Zoran, who comes in and says, well, rent freezes and, universalizing or bringing socialism into grocery stores and things like that. I have a problem with that. Like, people have, or should have the ability to make their money by owning a grocery store. And if the government steps in and says, well, no, you can't actually do that, because we need to make sure that you are also giving to all of these people over here, I don't know that that's biblical. I don't know that that's a biblical position. It also makes me think of something that I read today, is that, and I don't know if you've seen this, Krista, but because we've had so many conversations around immigration here in LA, there is a proposal for a rent freeze if people are illegal immigrants. And so what that would say would be, effectively would be like COVID. During COVID time, people couldn't be evicted for non-payment of rent. It would be the same thing now, because people are too afraid to go to work. They, their rent would be frozen. How is this fair, right? How is this just? That's the word that I'm looking for. How is this just to the landlord? Again, we have to think about, not just justice from the perspective of the poor, but justice is something that in scripture we see even to the rich. Like, I cannot participate unjustly to a person just because they may have more means, wealth, power, whatever, than I do. You guys, I'm out of time. I still have 2 more things to talk about. But with that, we are going to call it a night. Let me go through let's see.
I put most of them on the screen.
Okay. All right, you guys, thanks for hanging out with me for the last hour. I appreciate it. I'm glad to be with you guys. I hope you guys have a very awesome week. Make sure to check out all the things. That's our podcast we do on Saturday nights. This Saturday, I'm having a conversation with Dr. Christina Cerrucci. She's an OBGYN, and we are talking about gender affirming care. And what is it? Should we be for it? Like, what is a biblical approach? How should we be tackling this conversation? It's going to be a very good conversation. And then she also wrote a blog that you can find on our website, centerforbiblicalunity.com. And then I actually wrote a blog that released yesterday or Tuesday, I believe, Tuesday. So Dr. Chris's released today. And 2 days ago, I wrote a blog that is called From Selma to Drag Queen Story Hour, how the civil rights has been used to justify drag queen storytime events. And so, what I'm looking at is the connection between the civil rights movement and many of the LGBTQ plus laws that have been passed and things like that, and how the LGBTQ plus community has really attached itself to the struggle for racial justice. And so, check that out. And then what else? Make sure to download our CFBU app. Thanks, Krista, for putting that on the screen. Download our CFBU app. You can do that in your app store, either on your Android or your iPhone. And then also make sure to like or like our show, like our channel, like on Facebook. Help us get our likes up and the algorithms knowing that people actually want to view the content. You guys are awesome. Those are things that really, really, really help CFBU. It helps to get our content spread far and wide. And yeah, if you guys can help us as the family, that would be awesome and amazing. And we would be very, very grateful. All right, you guys, I will talk with